like you may just go for whatever comes your way. So I think unless and until you're in a very, very dire situation wherein
Hmm.
absolutely like you must, I think you should take your time. Just you should know your worth. Okay, this
Hmm.
is this is what I can command, this is what I deserve.
Yeah. Hi everyone, long time no see. And after a very, very long hiatus, we are back on Roaring Twenties. And today I have a very, very special guest with me. I am very excited to have one of my oldest friends from college, Vibha Bhaskar, to be a part of this episode. Vibha is a company secretary and she is one of the most authentic and very, very creative people I've known, and I've known her for a very long time. So, Vibha, we are super excited to have you here. So, tell us more about yourself.
Hi Chitra, hi everyone. I think I've been very excited for this. So, firstly, thank you for having me. Roaring Twenties. I think the name itself, from the time I've heard it, was very intriguing. So I was always like, oh, when am I coming here?
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, the topic was also really fun and interesting. So I thought, why not participate in this conversation? I've known you for a while, and I think I'll just say that I've always, I've been very interested in the way you have been an avid reader, and you've sort of always expressed yourself, whether it's on the social platforms, and you came on to writing a blog and Roaring Twenties, your podcast. So yeah, I always looked up to you when I'm here. So
Thank you.
it's
And
nice
I
to be
have
here.
you as well. So thank you. And really super, super duper excited about this episode. And today, the both of us are going to be talking about corporate girly confessions, which is basically us trying to decode and understand how women in the workplaces are trying to navigate their way into this very complicated landscape, and also trying to understand how they are trying to deal with the different biases that come their way, and how they're just really trying to make their place in this world. So without further ado, let's get started. So if we were to look at the whole scenario about 100 years ago, women from across the world never worked per se in the 1920s. Even the women who did tend to work, they only worked up until the time they got married. So which is basically like for a year or two at max, and then they just quit and then settle down and get busy with raising their children and everything. And their whole professional growth and everything was very contingent upon their spouses at the time. So that way the environment was very restrictive. But cut to about 100 years later, today globally we see a lot of women are entering the workplace again and again, and it's a great sight to see. And especially even in a country like India, for example, about 30 or so years ago, a lot of women were still not in the workplace. They were still homemakers, and they were still restricted to a certain set of responsibilities that they were assigned. But today, you see more and more women entering the workplaces, more and more newer generations entering the workplaces and trying to make their way into this entire world. Having said that, there are still a lot of issues that women face in the workspace, which we are going to be talking about in detail. To begin with, I would like to ask this question. Can we really bring our authentic selves to work? Like, that's the whole thing that, a lot of people preach about, how we should be very authentic at our workspaces and all. But is it really a reality? I don't think a lot of women really agree with that. Like for me, I personally don't, because I do feel that a lot of times women, especially like younger, early career professionals, do have this certain sense of restriction that they have to behave a certain way. Like they have to dress up in a certain way and speak in a certain way, so that way they don't come off as something too negative. So just to give you an example, like right now while I'm talking in this podcast, I'm conversing with Vibha, and in general also, like my voice is a lot deeper while I'm talking. But if you see me like at work, my voice would have like literally reached a pitch much higher, and I would sound much more unsure and a lot more scared, and I wouldn't sound like my authentic self, because there's a part of me that's like very very conscious about what the other person is perceiving of me. So like that's like my personal bias, like obviously not in terms of like the kind of clothes I wear, because I work from home. So I mean everybody has kind of gotten used to seeing me wear my pajamas to work all the time, but in terms of, the way I speak, I do feel like I'm not as authentic as I'd like to be. So, yeah, that's my perspective. Vibha, how about you? What do you think?
Well, yeah, I think authenticity is something that I think each individual will have to define for themselves firstly, like what authentic means to you. How, like you said, how real can you get when you are outside? And I think it's not just about workplace, in my opinion.
Hmm.
It's about every other place for that. There are very few, set of people or like your inner circle that you can say in front of whom you will be without filters. And
Hmm.
I think in all the other places, including extended family to some extent,
Or,
your friends, friends who are not your inner circle, or even at work, I think we all have. I wouldn't say mask. Mask is a very strong word, but
yeah, yeah.
probably you have layers. You have to filter it
Hmm.
out a little bit, and
Yeah,
that's not right or wrong. It's a very right or wrong would be a very straight
yeah.
answer for it. It's more of a
Hmm.
gray space wherein it's like it's
Agreed.
depends on whom you're talking to, what you're saying, like you said, how it is being perceived. All of that
Yeah,
matters. So I think few layers is fine as long as your core baseline is not moving. Uh, that
agreed.
that should work. That much
Yeah.
authenticity is good. But
Yeah, like that's also true. Like, I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from. So it is basically like, a lot of times you can be your most unfiltered self around a very few people, right? Like, you cannot
true.
just completely let your freakies out at your workplace. And I don't know, somebody might just say that they'll report you to HR also. So that's also another
Yeah.
crazy thing. But yeah, I totally feel that. Like, it is very important, like, instead of to hold back in situations where you need to hold back. Having said that, there are also some occasions, when you feel like, you tend to hold back a little too much. Like, maybe you might be someone who's a very, I would say, like a very creative person, for example, and someone who's got a lot of ideas, who has a very clear perspective of what to say, how, your work is going to progress and all of that. But there are times that like you're so nervous and you're so like inward looking, at times you cannot like truly express yourself or share your POV about that where the project needs to be directed and what direction it needs to take. So that way, like sometimes it becomes like a bit of a cage, and you're like, okay, sometimes it becomes very difficult to kind of assert yourself, which I think a lot of women do face in workplaces. Like, at least in other parts of life, you can still somewhat take a stand, but with the kind of layers that are there in the workspace, there are times when, it becomes very challenging to assert yourself also. So that is where, that whole struggle of like whether your authenticity is, is it just like a, I would say, like is it just like a way for you to measure and regulate your emotions, or is it coming at is your behavior at the workplace coming at the cost of hiding what you truly feel? So that is like a balance that you need to maintain. So yeah, that's one
Yeah.
challenge that I do see.
Yeah. I think what we're speaking of here essentially is like the hesitation of just expressing yourself sometimes, where you tend to
Yeah,
hold back. And that does, yeah, I have in my experience also seen somehow women do have that a little bit. And I think that's coming from a lot of conditioning, years and
yeah,
years of conditioning of how, like you said, like right from the past when women were not working to now where we've evolved to working, and everything around us is also very supportive, needless to say.
yeah,
um, families, spouses, everybody is pro working now. Everybody understands that this needs to be
Yeah.
done. So in that sense, I think what you were just mentioning is more our own hesitation of
Yeah.
how it's going to be taken, whether
Yeah.
it'll be taken in the right light, or whether you'll be termed,
Yeah.
oh, that is so silly, that's not the right thing. So I think we judge ourselves more than anybody else, so to
Agreed.
say.
Yeah.
So we are like the most critical critics
Yeah.
we have. So I think
Yeah.
that's
That's
something that we can overcome with time, and just
yeah.
more faith, that you can reassure yourself that, okay, I can speak, and so what if it's not going to work? So what if it's
Yeah.
once in a while it's not the best idea? It's going to be fine. Still going to be okay.
Yeah, that's true. It's like, I think that, like you rightly mentioned, it just comes with that experience, so to speak. Like, as you grow
True.
older in your workplace and, you just kind of realize, okay, it's okay to speak up about some of your most basic rights
Yeah.
also. Like for me, for example,
True.
I was initially like when I started my career, I was very hesitant to even talk about, raising like a salary raise and all of that, even though I'd put in enough hard work and all to to each of the projects
Yeah.
that had come my way. And then I think it was only after like 3.5 years of working, like after that time, I just very cautiously asked my manager at that time, can I get a raise? Because I've studied and I have like done these projects, it's done well. So can I please get
The
a raise? And then
awkward
she's like, first of all, it's
conversation.
about money. You have to be confident. It's okay. You want a raise? I will speak to them and then I'll get it done. So I mean, it's like
Okay.
that whole hesitation. It takes a lot of unlearning to kind of get out of that system. So obviously that's
Very
very,
true.
very true. But at the same time, like there is also like despite the fact that there's also these positive things, there is also a lot of conversation that is going on, which is about like the kind of biases that women have to face, like overall, like even with assertiveness, a lot of women are judged in a very negative light at times. Like for example, I read this study which just came out, I think a few weeks ago or something, which said that women were discriminated against on 30 factors, like 30 whopping factors at workplaces. And assertiveness was obviously one of them. Like if a woman is trying to be very assertive, she's considered as bossy. But if a man is trying to be assertive, he's considered as very, what do we say, a very
Confident.
assertive, sort of a leader, sort of a thing. But a woman should not be that assertive in nature. And similarly, like there are so many other biases also. Like you've got people who are talking about, like the kind of age the woman like how old the woman is. You People judge women basis that. You judge them basis their marital status. You judge them basis their qualifications, whether they have that kind of required skill sets. But on the other hand, for men, it is always like you would judge them on the basis of how their potential is. Like I would like to give an example of a friend of mine. So she was the other day, like not the other day, it was some time back. So she was working hard and she made one mistake at work, and her manager just went in a very harsh way, saying that she's just a kid in a very dismissive, cruel way. But at the same time, there was another colleague of hers who was slacking off constantly, who was doing nothing. And the manager, and it's a female manager, by the way, she went all enduringly. She's like, oh, he's just a kid. He'll learn with time. I mean, a girl making one mistake is
Yeah.
useless, and a guy making several mistakes is like, oh no, he'll learn. So it's like there are these a lot of these notions that are still prevalent, and that women in the workplaces really do have to face. So how about you? What is your take on this POV?
Oh, okay. That was hard to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. Touch wood, I think I'm in a better space when it comes to these things, or maybe I've not had such intense experiences.
Yeah.
But like you said, I
Neither
do
have I,
interact
but
with colleagues, friends. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So a lot of it depends on what sort of people you land up with also in a workplace scenario. Okay, so you may end up with a really great team and a really
Mm-hmm.
uh, cool manager who sort of gets you and like pushes you. And then you, like you said, you have managers like that who like dismiss
Yeah.
you, put you down, and all of that. So I think it's hard to like put everybody in that zone. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, everybody is like that. It's not true. There are
Yeah. Yeah.
really great people as well. You just have to probably, I think it's just like finding your partner in life. You just
Oh
have to
yeah.
find a good workplace. You just have
Yeah.
to, wait for that, wait for the right team,
Yeah.
and then it just gets better from there.
Yeah, it's like we don't normally see it until and unless, I don't know, like we hear it from the kind of people who we are surrounded by and all. So sometimes,
Yeah,
some of us like really luck out in that sense. For me, like for
yeah,
example, like
yeah,
my
very.
workplace is very particular about DEI and inclusivity and all of that. So they are very, very that way, are very very open as far as workspaces go. So like they are very focused on ensuring that everybody is comfortable and all of that. But a lot of workspaces are not like that, and I did not realize it per se before I started working here about like the need for DEI and how important it really is. And at the same time, yeah, like it's like things are getting better now, like a lot of people are improving, but at the same time, like it's going to take a lot of work in terms of kind of overcoming the age old biases
Yeah,
and yeah, like the conditioning that we had, like you
yeah,
said. So
yeah.
that's like a huge step, like for women to kind of navigate and make their way into the workplace. So yeah.
Yeah, here I think I'll just add one thing. I think you said was perfect. You can't really get a hang of everything before you join. A lot of times
Mhm.
things get revealed eventually, and for that, I would say women have an extremely good sense of intuition,
Oh
much
yeah.
much better than men, I would say. So we should
Yeah.
use that. So when you're meeting up and when you're having that initial phase, just trust your
Yeah.
intuition in that span of
Yeah.
time that you get to interact with them. You will more or less understand what can you expect. Of course, life can surprise you, and things can happen
Yeah.
later as well. But at least that initial screening, I would say that you do will really help
Yeah.
you with the kind of. If you're speaking to your direct line manager, then great. If you're speaking to a
Yeah.
team member, even then you get a hang of it. Okay, this is how they're dealing with. You get a sense of the work culture, so that
That's
really
very
helps.
true.
So I think
That's very
in
true.
your
Like,
selection that should be factored for sure.
yeah, yeah. I'll give you an example. Like, this is a very personal example. So there was one place like years ago I had interviewed for this place, and at that time, like the HR's manager over there, like she low-key kind of threatened me that if you don't join this company, you are going to be banned from the entire group of the companies. And I was horrified. I was like very, very terrified, like, oh my God, like really she's going to do that. And then I had to, like, I don't know, I had to reach out to my family members who knew somebody in the entire conglomerate. And then they also checked and they said that there is no policy like that. And at that time, I remember my grandmother, actually, she pointed it out. She's like, if this girl can blackmail you into coming into the company, imagine how much leverage she'll have over
Exactly.
you, and how much she and like the overall company would try to blackmail you and undermine you if you actually join this place. So you are absolutely spot on about the aspect of women's intuition, because my
Yeah,
grandma could
yeah.
really detect it from a mile wide, and I rejected the role. I was like, hey, I and then a
On
month
this,
later she begged me. Yeah, this HR lady, she just begged me. She's like, can you please join? And I was like, bro, no, thank you.
not happening.
Yeah.
I think this
But
is this
yes,
is
that
very relevant for freshers, like
yeah,
because as a fresher you're so desperate to get a job. What
agreed.
happens is
Yeah.
you may just go for whatever comes your way. So I think unless and until you're in a very, very dire situation wherein
Hmm.
absolutely like you must, but I don't think like most of us are touchwood
Yeah,
privileged
yeah.
enough that such situations are not upon us. But unless and until that thing is on you, I think you should take your time. Even if you're a fresher, just you should know your worth. कि, okay,
Hmm.
this is what I can command, this is what I deserve.
Yeah.
And even as a
Yeah.
fresher, you should be able to say that. And
Agreed.
I
Yeah.
I think that's when people make the most mistakes. That because I
Yeah.
still remember after my internship, there were several places wherein I gave an interview, and solely on the factor that I didn't like the energy during the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I think it was COVID, so a lot of it would happen online. So I did not even get a
Yeah.
chance to
Yeah.
actually go and feel the space. But whatever I could feel, and even if it was a video interview, I remember rejecting so many calls simply because I
Yeah.
didn't like the person I was interviewing. And I felt that that culture, I was not going to fit into that culture. And that was
Yeah.
actually a good decision because then I actually
Yeah.
like sort of the universe led me to a place wherein I could
Yeah.
actually get everything that I was looking for. So I think you should
Yeah.
need to have that patience in that phase,
Agreed.
especially.
Agreed. That's really true. Like for the, I would say like for like, any professional, especially like women, especially because they are like relatively newer to the workspace and they are navigating as a whole, as a gender as a whole, they are navigating a completely new landscape. Like there are some of us who've had our mothers or sisters, older sisters and all working. So we have that kind of
Yeah.
leverage to understand and navigate those dynamics. But a lot of the women out there are still like first generation employees of a company. So for them, especially, it's very important to kind of make sense of this world. So obviously there are multiple solutions, but yeah. All right then. So with that, after a lot of amazing points that we've covered, Vibha and I come to the end of yet another episode of Roaring Twenties. Vibha, it was really, really nice to have you on board, and it was super fun to see your perspective and how you've really brought out the bright side of how, women are navigating their way into the corporate workspace, and especially the important points that you've brought are very valuable. And I'm sure our listeners, and more specifically our listeners who are just starting with their careers, they would be very, very happy to hear this and understand, like it's the whole corporate journey for women is not as bad as it is made out to be, and it'll be a much more smoother journey. So thank you so much once again for being a part of Roaring Twenties. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. While we are in our 20s, it's still roaring. Thank you for having me. This was fun to discuss. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's actually all good, you know, like
Yeah, we
for
still have
everybody who's
three
coming in
years.
new. Yeah.
Yeah, we still have 3 years till our roaring 20s
Yeah, we do.
end. So yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, I'm very
Yes.
excited
Yes,
and
yes.
hope we have you on more of our episodes as well, and we can talk about very different
Gladly.
topics also. And for
Yes,
anybody
for
who's
sure.
listening to this podcast, please do send it to women, especially young women who are trying to make their way in the professional world, professional workspace, and do share in your feedback with us and tell us what you think. Take care. And on that note, stay tuned for the next episodes as well. And hope to speak to you all soon. Bye. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.